Welcome to the Developer Tribe. It's good to have you here for episode 5 of season 2 as we continue to unpack the practice and process of developers, educators and beyond. We've had some quality conversations already and I'm grateful to the speakers giving us their time and efforts. Here in Scotland, we're getting closer to getting back out into the world. I hope wherever you are, things are looking up too. Thanks for being here, however you got here. And with that, let's jump in. My guest today is a primary school teacher and pre-academy football coach. He has worked for Man City, Juventus, Arsenal, Preston North End and others spanning several countries, including the USA and Saudi Arabia. Recently completing a PGCE in primary education with a PE specialism, I'm looking forward to delving into his connection of theory to practice as one of the best coaches of young players I've had the pleasure of working with. With no further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome my close friend, Jack Stevens, to the pod.
Thanks, Tim. Great to hear from you. Thanks for having us on the pod.
Always a pleasure to see you and speak to you, regardless of the format. It's been a while coming. Just so pleased to get you on the platform.
Yeah, I obviously you reached out to me and mentioned about the podcast, and definitely as a close friend, it's a pleasure, and it's my first ever podcast, so looking forward to it.
Well, you wouldn't know. One of the last times I saw you, we were in Italy taking a group of players from Saudi to play in a Juventus World Cup youth tournament. Just such fond memories of those players. What was it like for you that week we spent in, what was it, Bardonecchia?
Yeah, it was. It was an amazing week, to be honest. We were very fortunate. We had a very supportive group of parents behind those players as well. But just the setting that we were playing the games in. I remember us speaking to the players after they had a heavy defeat, and we actually just took a moment to have a little look around of our surroundings, snow-capped mountains, good playing surface. Some of these children had never seen that before, really, obviously coming from Saudi, and just for them to soak up and actually be in that competitive environment. As you know, over in Saudi, there's not much many leagues going on, so for them to come out and I think they played an age group up as well, didn't they?
Yeah, vast majority of them. Yeah, it was a shock for them. Really was a shock, to experience competitive football of that level. But what a week it was. Look, you've travelled plenty to coach, clearly. What was your motivation to leave the UK in the first place?
For me, it's the coaching and the opportunity to go and coach abroad, but the chance to learn from different people, I suppose. I remember at university when I was doing my undergrad, I attended a meeting from a company from the USA. They came in and did a talk. We had over 300 people in the lecture at the time, and they were meeting at lunchtime, and only 3 out of 300 people went to the following meeting with the representative. And basically they said, do you want to come down to training day and get involved? And it just spiraled from there, really. But for me, the main reason for it was just to experience different cultures, how football is maybe perceived abroad in different countries, and the chance to meet different people. I'm quite a people person, really, and I enjoy interacting with different people. I always remember coaching one child in Saudi, and I think we had a group of mixed nationalities, and he was speaking French to one child, then English to another, and then Arabic to another, and I'm thinking, what, this kid's a genius.
A trilingual at 7.
Yeah, I'm thinking impressive, and I'm there going with getting by with broken Arabic. So
yeah, gosh, I don't know if I remember any Arabic now. I certainly didn't get very far with it.
But for me, just the overall rounding experience of learning from other coaches, but actually learning through the traveling.
Mm.
You learn so much. So
Yeah, you went to the USA first, then with Challenger, I believe, and one of the
yeah,
things, I've been over to the US a couple of times, and obviously we both know a lot of coaches that have gone out there, and it gets a bad rap, and rightly so. I think there's a lot of problems with the way in which, particularly foreign coaches, are treated and also marketed to the American audience. But the one thing that I would always say is the sheer number of hours that you get to coach. As a
yeah.
young, inexperienced coach, the sheer number of hours you get to be on the field. And for someone like yourself who, reflects carefully on what it is that they do, that must have been quite a steep learning curve.
I loved it. It was at 19, I got that opportunity, and to be delivering on camps with over 300 children and thinking, I'm in charge of this. You wouldn't have got that in the UK. No way. And you've got to think about other things. It's in the middle of the summer. It's the heat, so you've got to think about the welfare of the children as well, and how you might adapt things through quick drinks breaks. Just as things as such as setting up your practices, or actually giving you some time in between them to get yourself mentally ready for it. Because you'll know yourself, some of the camps, it was non-stop from 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. And you've got to keep those levels up, and even when you might be having a down day yourself, it's kind of, you've got to put on a bit of a character as such, and get yourself through it and enjoy it, because it's the experience for the children as well. They're going to remember it. But no, a huge learning curve, that traveling on a Sunday, 16 hours or something, at 9 hours depending where it was, to your next camp, and factoring that into your journey, and liaising with other members of staff who you might be meeting on the way to pick up equipment. Amazing experience. Wouldn't change it for the world, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a tough one to balance, isn't it? Because when I think back to my first experiences in the US, there was a weekend where I went from New Jersey over to Indiana, which I think was something like a 14-hour journey or something like that. Stopped over in Cincinnati, in Ohio, and you're just not going to have those experiences, as you say, in the UK. And I have very fond memories of both places and the journey. But when you do look back and you think, Christ, I've covered such distance. And this was part of the issue we experienced in Saudi as well, that obviously we cared greatly about the kids that we were working with and the program. We wanted it to be a success, but it is hard work. It's six days a week, if not 7 at times, and quite often working very long hours. Having come back to the UK and decided to train as a teacher, what was the motivation to come back and to retrain?
For me, when I was doing my undergrad, it was based around PE and school sport. And whilst I was doing that, obviously, built up some experience with my coaching badges and various part-time jobs alongside my degree. And I got really into the coaching side of it, which led to obviously various jobs abroad. And then during that time, the back end, when in Saudi, I thought, you know what, I'm really enjoying working with these younger age groups, between 4 and 11. And for me, I've always enjoyed working in that age bracket. And I thought, you know what, probably now is a good time to give myself a year. And it was a full-on year. Bearing in mind, we obviously had the pandemic at the back of it, which was a bit tricky, trying to teach online and those types of things to complete my PGCE. But no, for me, the main motive is I've always enjoyed working with that age group, and in the primary age, and no day is ever the same. it's completely different. And do you know what? The children will always tell you the truth. They'll always tell you how it is. Oh, sir, I didn't like that lesson. It was boring. Or can we do this next time? Or they'll always
Sure.
tell you the truth. And even when you are having those days where you are struggling, it still puts a smile on your face. And like I said, no day's ever the same.
I've said it before, and I could wax lyrical about your practice with young players for a long, long time, particularly the care that you take over that kind of age group. There was a group of players you had at Saudi in a school that was in the compound that we lived in, and that's really where I sort of witnessed you take this group of players that simply didn't know how to play or train. They'd never experienced it before, despite being 9, 10 years old, and had them playing in the competitive league that we set up as well. I know plenty of coaches, perhaps even myself included, that would have lost their motivation to work with that group. How was it you approached that and took them from a place where, I remember watching, they're 40 yards away from the training area because they're busy running after a ball that on that surface that you were playing on had rolled away miles. It went from that to much more structured and much more enjoyable by the looks of it. How did you go on that journey?
For me, it was when I first started working with that group of players. They weren't used to any structure. It was they'd never seen structure before, really, and it was the expectations that we wanted from them. At the end of the day, they were part of a professional club, so we had to set those. But for me, building the rapport with the children, getting down to their level, and making it fun to start with, it's that enticing them, isn't it, with the practices, making it enjoyable, making them want to come back week after week, because we only had I think it was just the one session a week with them at the time, and to get them actually playing in competitive games, and two of those players actually ending up going to play at the Juventus World Cup was quite an achievement, really. Now, actually, when I look back at it, and to
No,
actually get them
absolutely it
them
was.
playing football as well.
Yeah. We should clarify that the Juventus World Cup is a tournament run in Italy where they get players from all across the world, all the different academies across the world that Juventus has, which are huge numbers of them. We should probably clarify what it actually was.
Yeah, it was. I'm trying to think how many countries were involved. I remember we played Guatemala, Honduras were there. There was.
It was a Polish team that won. That won.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a crowd of about 200, and they all had.
Yeah, drums, flares, the lot. Yeah. So no, you took that group from a position of not being able to travel like that and compete to, as you say, two of them being selected and going and having an incredible experience. This is all before you've taken this PGCE. So you're talking about rapport building, you're talking about coach-athlete relationships and that kind of thing that is so natural to you. In then doing your PGCE, how did you start to connect theory to these practices?
For me, some of the approaches that I was used to working with certain players within a school setting, it still did work in a way, but at other times it didn't. I had to take a more firmer approach, because when I was in the schools on a day-to-day basis, and especially as a student, with the older classes, they may think, okay, as a student, we can be a bit more, try and take advantage of them or try it on a little bit with their behavior. But for me, I had to be a lot more firmer in my approach, and that way they knew where they stood then, especially maybe within the inner city schools where, behavior of a certain standard is expected. But that was in terms of that putting into practice. That was a good learning curve. You know, a lot of children are coming from tricky backgrounds, and often, probably for me as well, when I worked in one school, some of them children, all they know is someone shouting at them or raising their voice at them, and they've actually never had someone, you know, speak to them in a softer tone or believe in them that they can do something in a certain way. So one thing that I tried to use whilst on placements, and it was you know, I was very fortunate. My mentor said to me, "Try what you want. Try any approaches." And at first, positive reinforcement with the behaviour wasn't really working. But after a while, those kids that were disruptive actually started buying into it a little bit more, the positive reinforcement and the praise, and I could actually see them putting in the effort, which was always good to see.
Well,
But
explain to us a bit, you know, what do you mean by positive reinforcement? Because you've said there that you had to be a little bit firmer than perhaps you
yeah,
would naturally be. So how does positive reinforcement fit within um, a performance, I would suggest, for you of having to be a bit firmer?
yeah. I mean, I was firmer at first, so then they knew where they stood basically, because I didn't want to go in there straight away and be praising them all the time, and then it just becomes second nature to them. But after a while, when they actually did a task that was asked of them, or they produced a certain standard of work, or their behaviour was on point, I'd reinforce it what they've done well, but actually give a reason why behind it. So, not, I mean, I suppose it's just like when you're coaching, it could just be well done, but what actually is it that they've done well? Um, and it's got to be that praise has got to be specific. It can't, because it'll just go in one ear and out the other. If it's, and it'll just become second nature to it. But for me, I tried to make the praise specific and reinforce that they were doing the right things, I suppose.
Yeah, it's connecting it to those specifics, as you say, so that they have an understanding of I'm being praised for X, Y, Z, rather than just constant praise. Yeah, I mean we've both seen it, I'm sure, of, you know, with coaching, that, you know, quite often get coaches on the side. Oh, that's good, well done, good work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we've all done it.
we've all done it. Yeah,
Yeah.
what does that actually mean? Or sometimes we assume that the players know what we're praising them for because of maybe the timing of the praise, but quite often they won't, and partly because they're busy playing or they're busy studying or whatever it is. So no, it's a really important part of positive reinforcement that it does need to be specific. How did that connect with you know, your studies on your PGCE? Because obviously you're teaching at the same time, you're getting experience at the same time. So talk to us about how the theory you're learning in classroom connects with the ongoing practice that you were doing.
It was, I think we had to produce an assignment around high quality learning and teaching, and a lot of it was based on reflection and how practitioners reflect. Um, I mean, as coaches, you know, you often reflect on a session and think how you could have changed that. And for me, it was moving from a different environment from the pitch to the classroom, and that's what I found I struggled with at first. Um, and it was how, okay, these children now are, you know, they're seated. Some might start to fidget, or they might struggle to sit still. How can we adapt it within the classroom? So uh, I remember doing one lesson. It was a geography lesson, and the first lesson was really static. And I thought, you know, you know deep down inside when there's a buzz of learning, you can feel it. And I reflected, I look back and I go, right, what could we change? And I made it into a more interactive lesson where they're moving around, they're searching for clues or answers or working as pairs. And I quite like a busy classroom and discussion going on. But yeah, I would say just a lot of reflection and still going on now. It's, in this first bit of my NQT year, and trying to reflect every day, and got a journal together to try and put. Sometimes it's obviously good reflecting in your mind and stuff, but for me, I like putting things down on paper as well.
Yeah, what does that reflective practice look like? That's interesting.
For me, in terms of the journal,
Yeah,
or
just do you have a format that you follow? Is it quite stream of consciousness?
I would just say at the end of the day, I just jot down what went well, and even better, what could be even better if. So what could I improve on, or adapt, or change, or yeah,
And
just maybe three or four bullet points on each one.
that's come directly from your football coaching world, isn't it?
Yeah.
That what went well, and even better if those of us
Yeah.
who've been through the FA pathway will be very familiar with. How important do you think it is then that, I mean, if I make this a personal thing, that when I started doing reflective practice, when it wasn't required by the club I was working with, I was very, very often picking out the negatives, either about the training session, the game, my own practices. It's much easier to see the things that need fixing. And then when it was, I'm being almost surveilled, I'm working in academy, I need to provide reflections on training sessions, on games. I need to do it for every individual player. I mean, it's quite time consuming, but also, it's going to be viewed. Someone's going to look at it. So obviously my writing, my rhetoric it changed. Of course it did. But I noticed that I was really picking out the negatives often. And actually it was getting me down quite a lot. So I'm just curious, why have you picked a system in which you are deliberately searching for the things that have gone well? And what effect has that had on your practice?
No, good question. I suppose it's like you touched on before. It's a system that I've maybe used before within my coaching. I mean, it might be maybe to actually ask the children, maybe in future, what did you enjoy about the lesson? What did you find hard? Is there anything that you might change, or what? Maybe put the opinion over to them, give them a little bit more ownership rather than your own thoughts. But suppose it's just a way of reflecting that I've been used to. I mean, even sometimes when you're driving home in the car, I quite find that. So I've got about a half an hour commute or so. I quite find that at the end of the day a good time to reflect, even just going back through things in your head. Okay, could I have organised that equipment better, or could we save time by having this ready, or things like that, really. But yeah, main reason for using that was just one I've been used to, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I mean, I literally, I had to search for a different process because I just realized that it was, it was getting me down about my practice, to be perfectly honest with you, because all I was picking out was these negatives, things that I had to improve
Yeah.
on. And I suppose I was doing that more because it came more naturally, as it does to us, but also that I thought that was what was required of the process. So I very often use something called appreciative inquiry model now, and I appreciate it's not really made for the personal use. It's really made for kind of group use, but it's discovery, dream, design, and destiny. And in each of those, then I really like that as a start of discover. What am I discovering about my practice and myself through this reflective process? I mean, it just immediately starts in a different way. So I was just curious as to your process there, and why it's important to you.
I love that theory behind that. It's a very positive approach. I like it.
It's made a huge difference, especially to my coaching efficacy, what I think of myself as a coach. I've been able to notice more things that are more positive in nature. And that can be quite difficult to do sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've been trying to do recently within the lockdown was do a gratitude journal. Just write 3 things down at the end of each day, maybe just before I'm going to bed, of what you really appreciate. And I found with that's actually changed my mindset a little bit, because I mean, I'm sure most people during this, at some point during this lockdown, have had one of those down days where you're just not feeling with it and it's not going right, or it's not it's not as how can I say it? It's not as bright as you'd like it to be. But I found that just doing that at the end of each night, 3 bullet points before you go to bed, and you wake up the next day, and I find that it puts me in a better place.
Is that difficult to do when you've had a quote unquote bad day?
Yeah, it can be, but for me, it puts things in perspective. It puts things, actually, you go, it's not too bad, is it? I mean, working alongside yourself. I mean, we had to push each other through on some days, didn't we? Where we might be struggling or tired, and you appreciate that, don't you? But at this moment, sometimes within lockdown, you can feel a bit isolated, and it is hard. So it's appreciating the small things or in life, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the pod, and why I've just loved being able to stay in touch with you, is when we were working in Saudi together, it was that understanding between us that one of us, both of us, could be having a shocker or be struggling a bit, but at its heart, that's not the kid's fault. That isn't anything to do with the kid turning up to practice. They've probably been looking forward to that all day. So it is up to us to be able to put that to the side. But I often find that, that's only difficult for 2 or 3 minutes. By the time you start practice anyway, we're doing what we love, and it's only until you finish that you're like, oh God, I'm so tired.
Yeah. It can take it out of you, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. Well, talk to us about what holistic development means to you, because these are conversations we've had before, and I know it's important to you. How does that show up for you, and is it similar in both the coaching environment and the teaching environment?
Yeah, I mean, I'll hold my hands up in terms of maybe technical knowledge and tactical knowledge. Yeah, I've got an all right base knowledge around that, but for me, building the rapport and those life skills within the sessions were always more important to me. Whether they were for the children, I'm not sure, but no, for me, that's more my philosophy, I suppose, in terms of something as simple as a child learning to tie their shoelace. Yeah.
And look, not being facetious here, that's not exactly what you mean by a life skill.
Yeah.
What are life skills, and how do you approach it? What do you think it is that you do that supports young people in developing those life skills?
Things such as how you communicate to others, or respect of your belongings. Um, some children maybe used to come to a session and they'd throw their bags that mum or dad's got them, or their drinks bottle, and they just chuck it, and they're not bothered where they put it, or the footballs that they've got, the equipment that we provided, they just maybe disregard that and not collect it at the end of the session. So things such as that, when we finish the session, we're a team, we collect all the equipment together, we work as a team to get otherwise, if we lose this equipment, we're gonna have nothing to play with. And it even stems to going right back to your 4 and 5 year olds at the start, where at the end of the session, making a fun game where they actually collect the equipment. So, right, who can get all the cones away from the cone monster, right? Who can get the most, and then adding a little bit of competition in there, all those types of things. But yeah, communication, that could be an appreciation of your equipment and your environment is one life skill. Um, the importance of teamwork as well. A lot of players and children think it's just about them. So within the school setting or either within coaching, they might be doing paired work or group work where we have to listen to others, because at the end of the day, within life, you're going to work with others. You're going to be part of a team, whether it's in an office or wherever your job takes you. You're going at some point you will need to work as a team. So even things like that. So I remember working with the under 14s, letting them do the team talk. Let them do the team talk. They can discuss it or select the formation. Listen to other people's opinions. I think so and so should play at right back today because he can get up and down the line really quick. He change of direction. All these types of things we try to involve in the practices and sessions, and it's actually the deeper things involved within coaching and teaching. But yeah, within the life skills and a holistic development, I suppose it's just developing that whole child really through your practices and teaching.
Right, it's a really good example of getting some ownership in a really easy way, and I think it's important to say that if you are passing on some of the responsibility and ownership of certain elements, like you've described, team talks there and choosing formation and having that communication with each other, and perhaps some conflict negotiation at times as well, that as coaches, we're not then just stepping away from that. It's not a case of give it to the players and now I abdicate my responsibility as a coach. You're involved in that, whether that is by just overseeing or being nearby. Sometimes you might even have to sort of fake that you're not really listening or that you're not really involved, but you are, you're just keeping an eye out or an ear out. But passing on that responsibility. And I think quite often for us when, working for Juve and Arsenal before that in Saudi, for quite a lot of those players, that was the first time that anyone had either picked them up on some poor behaviors or offered them a chance to have some adaptive behaviors, some really positive behaviors. I remember there was a lad that came to my under sevens practices, and he had a nanny, and the nanny was carrying everything. Food. She was carrying the rucksack, and obviously we're working in a different culture, so you have to be sensitive to that. But I remember saying to the lad, "No, you carry your bag, you carry your equipment. She can bring other things as well if needs be, but you carry your equipment." And it really came after he just dropped the bag about 20 yards in front of the nanny and just carried on walking. Just totally expecting the nanny to pick it up, who would have done, by the way, as well, really would have just picked. So there's an important part there, though, and it was something that I thought you were excellent at, separating the behavior from the child. It wouldn't have been right for me just to go after him, really to come down hard on that poor behavior, in my opinion, because he doesn't know any different.
No.
That's what he's grown up with. So
it's second nature to them, isn't it?
That's right. So when you were working with players in this way, could you give us an example of, a maladaptive behavior that was occurring in your practices and how you pushed that forwards towards something that was more positive and more useful?
Yeah, I think like you touched on before, some of the children had never seen the structure or been told a certain way, and there's a way of putting it across. And I think for me, maybe when the children used to turn up to practice. Prior to this, they might have been just messing around in the waiting area before the session, where there's a seating area, or there might be some behaviour issues going on. But rather than that, okay, we've got some mini goals, lads. Why don't you're old enough, why don't you get the goals? Set yourselves up a small game of might be head tennis or football tennis or a 2v2. Or look, we've got balls there. Yep, you've arrived early. That's great. Putting a positive spin on it straight away. Okay, practice some keepy ups. Those types of things, or go and practice some of your turns or skills that you want to work on, or it might be passing or anything. Trying to put some creative games and some ownership, especially with the older, maybe the YDP phase. Giving them some ownership, and when they arrive, that actually, okay, rather than messing around in the seating area whilst there's a session still going on, why don't you set something up and actually put the time that you've come early for, why don't you put that actually on the positive side and work on some skills?
And again, that practice is just something they wouldn't have thought they were allowed to do. It's not so much that they wouldn't want to, it's that they wouldn't have felt like they could. So yeah, you set up an environment there where they've got a bit more ownership, and they can crack on with things like that. So tell us, what was the biggest learning for you from the PGCE?
It was a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind year. For me, going into maybe a reception classroom, working with 4 or 5-year-olds, their first experience of school, and as an adult, you remember as a child, don't the adults seem huge? So getting down, making sure you're getting down to their level, and things like the importance of play and actually letting them interact with each other. And we had things like a carousel approach, but within a classroom and an outdoor area. So working with the 4 and 5-year-olds, you might have 2 children in the mud kitchen making a mud pie, and then you might have 3 children in the water area, and working within. They might have different shapes floating around in the water. Right? Can we name this shape? And then you might have someone on the carpet doing some. But with that age group, you don't realize their attention span goes so quick. So it has to be constantly something new all the time. Even simple things as, still learning it now. When the children have their, especially in the younger years in Key Stage 1, when the children have their dinner, life skills in terms of actually cutting up their food and eating it and making sure we're not spilling it, and how we hold our knife and fork, and how we hold our cup, and all these types of things you kind of take for granted as an adult, but these are all the things you pick up along the way. And it was such it's what a 1-year course, and it flies by, and you constantly learning all the time, and still am. And you're asking experienced teachers, picking things up from them, but also really considering that school might actually be the child's only safe place. Actually, when you're working in some of the tougher schools and areas where children might need the school for a safe area, where they're coming to school, they've not had any breakfast. Okay, well, there's a breakfast club here where they can have toast, some fruit. There's some extracurricular games going on in the morning, and it sets them up right for the day. You kind of take those things for granted, really, don't you? But it just constantly learning, and the PGCE for me was a very, very positive experience, and met some excellent people along the way on that course.
Yeah, I've no doubt, and mildly jealous of the kids that get you as a teacher. I'm sure they'll be delighted to have you, and they'll learn a great deal from you, from just the way you are as a role model, and the things that you're picking up, and how much care you take of noticing what's going on for each individual. So I just want to say thank you for today. I really appreciate you coming on and spending the time. And I just want to ask you, where's your career going? You're teaching, you're coaching at the same time. I know football is obviously a big part of your life. Any updates for us? What's happening for you?
Firstly, just thank you for having me on the pod. It's been really enjoyable. And no, for me, in terms of my career, it's a bit of a strange one, because sometimes you're putting that balance in between the two. Do I go coaching, teaching? But for me at the moment, I'm happy doing both, really, because I don't want to lose sight of my coaching. I enjoy that. But in terms of my career, I would probably say more focusing towards the teaching side at the minute, because that's given me a lot of, in terms of a lot of taking my time up, really. So my focus solely at the minute has mainly been on the teaching with the NQT year, which is quite in depth, really. So I've got to meet certain standards within the teaching standards, but coaching part time alongside that as well is great. Hopefully, maybe get onto a UEFA B in the near future. I was hoping to do that recently, but obviously with the current situation, it's not been possible. But yeah, I wouldn't ever rule out just leaving the coaching. It's something I think I'll always be involved in some way or another.
Yeah, I mean, football will always be a big part of your life. I just don't doubt that. I mean, walking around a supermarket with you, and if someone bumps into you, the first thing you say is ref. or man on, so even in situations,
triple yellow card, that.
Yeah. So even in situations where there's not even a football in sight, you're still using the terminology. One last question for you: if you could have an audience with just one person, who would that be?
Oh, great question. Audience with one person, who would it be? Got me thinking there. Ooh, I would probably say I'd like to say my old PE teacher. A chap called Mr. Ma. He was an Australian bloke, and he just taught me so much. He taught me a lot, made me want to be a teacher, made me get involved in sport, gave me a lot of responsibility. He was just great teacher, to be honest, and just someone I looked up to at the time. And it was always fun to be part of his lessons, and it'd be good to listen to him, some of his experience. It's someone I'd like to reach out to actually and connect with, but I need to find a way of contacting them.
Maybe this is the way, but what would you want to ask him?
Just his thoughts of a teacher, I suppose, and maybe pick his brains and how his career developed and what he thought of us maybe as a cohort at the time.
Yeah,
we were quite a rowdy bunch, to say the least.
But it indicative of how important role models as we're growing up can have such an impact on what we want to do and what our interests are. And I think you're going to have that same impact on some of the young people that you get in have contact with. So keep going with it. Good luck with the rest of the NQT. Jack, thank you so much for your time today. If anyone was to want to reach out to you, what would be the best way?
For me, I'd probably say email. I am on social media, but email. I am on Instagram as well. But for me, that'd probably be the best way. Just email.
Yeah, no problem. I'll make sure that your email is part of the description for this, and just leaves me to say welcome to the tribe.
Now, thank you very much, Tim, and you look after yourself, and hopefully we can catch up again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. A big thank you to Jack for today's conversation. It was so interesting hearing him talk about his practice as someone who has worked closely with him. It was good to relive some of the memories of being in Saudi Arabia together. The music you're listening to is by BB Phoenix. You can find her details in the links. My thanks to you for listening and engaging with this podcast. Please do subscribe and leave feedback. It really helps grow the show so we can get this detail out to more people. Take care, and we look forward to having you back here next week.